Hey Josie, how you doing? Okay, I've got your fire and ice up, and I also got. Okay, let me see. So you say you can definitely see your mistakes. I opened this so we can make some comparisons, and I think that a lot of the inconsistencies are just based on very simple relationships, specifically thin to thick, and we can see that in a lot of the stems, the vertical stems in your work. So let's go ahead and take a look. For example, okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the F. The F is looking pretty good as far as the vertical stem, the thickness of the branches, I'm sorry, the arms, the upper arm. The upper arm is a little too thick over here. As you can see when we take a look at it, the upper arm actually is thinnest at the point where it meets the stem. And then it gets a little thicker as it tapers down into that beak, or that serif right there. So you can see that that's an inconsistency there. I think that the rest of the letter forms are looking pretty good. We see a little bit of the counter of the E. That's a little inconsistent. That looks more like almost like a teardrop, whereas this looks like more of a semicircle. You can see right there in that area, right there, where this is closed down a little too much. I think the counter is a little more open in the actual E. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other letter forms. I want to get that A in there so we can take a look at that. So, okay, the A is looking pretty good, though you're kind of squared off right there on that teardrop serif right there. So watch that. I think the bowl looks pretty good, but again, you've got that teardrop that's curling up there in that inside counter. As we see in the lowercase a in Helvetica, but that you want to watch because that teardrop, that kind of where that curls up there, we don't see that. That just comes across straight right there, and as it comes right back down. A couple of the other letter forms I think are just a matter of consistency, Josie. It's just a matter of really trying to duplicate what you see. Let's take a look at the stem of the capital I, and we can see that right now it's kind of bows in on both sides. So it's its thinnest point right in the middle, but right here we can see as that curves down from the serif, it goes straight down. So that's a true vertical. So you definitely want to represent that in your sketches. Now, another thing that I'm seeing, and then this is somewhat problematic, so really pay attention to this in your next submission. But I'm guessing that you shot this with a camera and didn't scan it, which is fine, but just make sure that your camera is directly in front or over. I don't know, if you place your drawing on your desk, make sure that camera is directly over it as opposed to tilted to the side or one side. Make sure that camera is perfectly level. Josie, the reason I'm saying that is because of this phenomenon right here. Let me move that, and we'll bring this in. I'm just going to use this as a straight edge. So I'm going to place this right here. Just watch that baseline right there. I'm going to place that on the lower serif of that cap F. Okay, and we can see the baseline is moving up. Now again, I don't know if it was drawn that way or if it's just perspective from the way it was shot, but you definitely want to watch that. Watch that in your presentation. Okay, let's move on to spacing. So I think the spacing, the main thing I'm seeing right now is this space right here. So the reason we moved from banana to fire and ice is because fire and ice is 3 words and banana is 1. So we are not only are we continuing our study of letter spacing, but we're also introducing word spacing, which is just as important. As we can see in the word spacing right now, this space between and ice is much smaller than the space between fire and. What does that do? This should be a review for you. This should be a review from our course materials. But what that effectively does is it creates a group right here. Okay, because these seem to be somewhat associated, whereas this doesn't. In practice, what it does, it forces the eye to read fire and ice as fire with a little pause and ice. And that's simply because that space right there is greater than that space right there. So instead of reading fire and ice, we're reading fire and ice. Do you see what I'm saying? I hope that makes sense. And that's really, really an important point. So if that's not making clear sense, let me know. I'll see if I can clarify that a little bit. So let's look at letter spacing. I think the space between the F and the I could be closed down just a little bit. Not much at all, just a little. That's going to establish your spacing since that's the first space that you're going to. Oh, you know what I want to do? I want to just use my straight edge here real quick. And I just want to do one more thing. Let's take a look at the verticals. I'm going to place that at the very top of the F. okay? Let me do that over here, and let's see what happens if I place that at the top of the F. Okay, there's the straight edge. That's perfectly straight, up and down, true vertical, right? Over here, we can see that it's not. It's kind of slanted this way. And we can see that in a couple other areas. They're on the I, and more so in fire than in any of the other letter forms. So watch that. Okay, back to letter spacing. So let me move that. Okay, so fire, just a little bit closer right there. That can be closed down too, and so can that. So fire, I think, is really, when we look at the word fire, we're looking at 4 letters as opposed to 1 word. So I think the spacing in fire is a little too wide, so let's close down the space between the F and the I and the R, the R and the E. Okay, then establish what you think would be good normal word spacing, the space between the fire and the space between and ice, and make sure that's consistent. That can be the exact, consistent. Now, we're going to use the same kind of rules of kerning with straight letter forms, curved letter forms, and curved meets straight that we talked about in week 1, remember? So that's going to establish your spacing between your words. I think that the spacing between the A and the N, you can close that down just a touch. You don't want your serifs to touch, so just a little bit. That might be a little too close right there, because right now that curved branch of the, that curved bowl of the D is really, really encroaching that negative space inside the serif of the N. I think that's a little too dense right there. I think ice is kerned really nicely, very nicely. I think ice is actually kerned just perfectly. So those are my recommendations in moving forward. And again, it's different than banana because there's 3 words. So we have to take into consideration not only the kerning, but the word spacing as well. Okay, at that, and now craft. Just some consistencies in the way that you're sketching the letter forms, and I think you'll be good to go. All right, Josie, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.